Surgeries are vital, life-saving operations, as we know, but they can also be extremely risky and don't always achieve the desired outcome. Invasive procedures can risk complications, and nerve damage is one of the most serious that can come up. But it seems scientists have recently come up with a new way to bring that risk down. Stay tuned as we discuss. First up, the risk of nerve damage. Even the most experienced and skilled surgeons have to work very carefully when rooting around inside the human body. Accessing the area where the team has to operate usually involves going through the delicate network of nerves that crisscross across the whole body. There's an unavoidable risk of pulling or pinching or even cutting a nerve in such a way that has a real effect on the patient. How severe can the effects be? Well, it depends on which nerve got damaged and how bad the damage is. Sometimes the patient ends up with a burning or tingling sensation that lasts for a relatively short period. That's the sort of thing you pretty much have to be ready for when going through an invasive operation. But it can get a lot worse. If you have a thyroid condition, you might have to get your thyroid removed, and there's a 15% chance of your voice being permanently changed by the impact to your voice box. Other possible effects include numbness, loss of control of the affected body part, and even muscle atrophy. So, what ideas have we had so far? Not many, as it happens. When it comes to nerve damage during surgeries, surgeons can do their best to avoid doing any damage, but sometimes there's no getting around it. The fragility of nerves and the way they can interfere with an invasive procedure kinda makes it inevitable to an extent. The good news is that permanent nerve damage is relatively uncommon. Permanent damage occurs in about 2% of all surgeries, which is bad news for that 2%. But that does mean the average patient is more than likely to end up with recoverable nerve damage. The non-permanent nerve damage can usually heal, or the surgeons can repair the nerves by cutting and reconnecting things around like wires in a circuit. As much as we try to soften the blow, the thought of your nerves getting snipped is understandably freaky. Does that mean you should never get surgery? Of course not. But right now, your best bet is to make sure you only get operated on by a qualified and highly experienced surgeon, and even that won't bring the risk down to 0%. When going through such procedures, it also helps if you have someone watching your back and making sure the medical staff is doing their due diligence, because you won't have much control over the situation. Research has been going on for decades on how to eliminate the risk altogether, and there are lots of theories out there, but for now they remain stuck in the pages of medical journals. There is one breakthrough that's been published recently and has a strong chance of making it into hospitals. Let's take a look at it. Next, could a hydrogel be the answer? The latest idea of how to prevent nerve damage is by highlighting them using a fluorescent substance. This would work in a way similar to a barium meal test, where you eat a barium meal that highlights all the parts of your digestive system on an X-ray. The technical term for what the barium meal does is it acts as a contrast medium, and if a contrast medium could be applied to the nerves of a patient, surgeons would be able to easily avoid them. At the Oregon Health and Science University, Adam Alani and Summer Gibbs spearheaded research into using a hydrogel fluorophore based on Pleuronix. We know you're confused, and we've got you covered. A fluorophore is a type of molecule that absorbs and emits light, and Pleuronix are a type of polymer that can be used to make a fluorophore. This hydrogel normally exists as a watery liquid, and it can be injected into the area where an operation has to take place. Inside the body, it turns into a gel-like substance that coats the nerves. When exposed to the lights of the operation room, the fluorophores in the gel become excited and emit the light, causing the nerves to sort of glow. That should make it easy as pie to avoid the nerves as surgeons navigate the patient's insides. Unlike a lot of other nerve-sparing solutions, this can be applied to any part of the body, so it can be used universally in all types of procedures. And what makes it even better is that regulators would be happy with it as well. Since the US Food and Drug Administration has already approved Pleuronix for medicinal use, the research team can piggyback off that approval to dive into phase 1 clinical trials. It doesn't use any exotic chemicals and high-tech devices either, and all the components of this method are already in production in different contexts. The OHSU team has successfully demonstrated the method in mice and pigs, and their findings were published in the journal Biomaterials. We may have just witnessed a landmark achievement in the medical field. So if you were scared off from getting surgeries because of what we said before, you can be assured that the scientific world is working to perfect nerve-sparing techniques. Though, if we're being honest, the idea of some doctors rummaging inside our bodies will never not be scary. Next, in other news, can you sue? Having your nerves damaged in a surgery, especially if it's a lasting sort of damage, is pretty bad news. If anyone else were to damage a part of your body, say with their fists or a bat, you'd be itching to take them to court. So we can't help but wonder, can you sue a surgeon who damages your nerves? You might actually have a case there. According to the Dolan Dobrinsky Rosenblum Bluestein Law Firm, that was a long name. A patient can sue for medical malpractice if they can prove that the nerve damage they suffered could have been avoided by a competent surgeon. Some nerve damage is inevitable as they make incisions into the area where they have to operate, but a slip of the hand or a misjudgment can lead to unnecessary damage. Sometimes medical malpractice sticks out like such a sore throat that it can be a pretty slam dunk case, but it's possible for nerve damage issues to be more of a gray area. As a layperson, you'd have a hard time proving the damage you suffered was avoidable. That's where you'd have to hire a firm like DDRB or one with a shorter name. Your lawyer would then consult with other medical professionals and help you build your prosecution. Has a lawsuit like that ever happened? Unfortunately, it has. And now, a patient's bike ride becomes his last. In 2017, West Virginia man Mike Rogers suffered a motorcycle accident that led him to the emergency room. He had suffered a spinal fracture, but was otherwise fine neurologically. Before the surgery that would change his life forever, Rogers had relatively good control of his motor functions. He ended up in the care of Dr. John Orfanos, who recommended a back brace at first but changed his mind to a spinal surgery instead. He did all this without taking an MRI of his spine, which would have helped him identify for certain what Rogers needed. Dr. Orfanos simply went ahead and fused his patient's vertebrae, and when Rogers woke up, he had lost all motor control. That gave the doctor a jolt, and he performed a second operation, but it didn't help. Mike Rogers was paralyzed from the waist down and has no chance of recovering. He sued right away, and in April this year, the case went in his favor. $17 million in damages is a big win, but we imagine it was cold comfort to Mike Rogers, who wouldn't be able to buy his legs back even if he had twice the amount. Stories like this certainly make you think that we often find ourselves trusting our lives to doctors, but the doctors are just as human as we are. Finally, a mistake leaves a patient with brain damage. We've heard stories about surgeons leaving tools inside the bodies of their patients, but in 2020, Dr. Benjamin Gelber took things to a catastrophic level while operating on Davis Nicholas of Bellwood. Dr. Gelber was a brain surgeon, and you'd expect brain surgeons to be the most careful surgeons of all. Unfortunately, he slipped up and left a cotton ball doused in anesthetic inside David's brain. As he performed the surgery, he accidentally pushed the ball further into David's brain, causing a hemorrhage. We're a long way from damaging individual nerves. Dr. Gelber had left David Nichols with brain damage and associated side effects, like reduced cognition and motor function. The Nichols family sued, and the case hasn't gone to court yet. If the court rules against Gelber, it could destroy his life, as the Nichols family would want him to pay out enough to cover damages as well as support the medical assistance that David will need for the rest of his life. But just like Mike Rogers, Gelber's life has been ruined in a way that no amount of money or time could fix. It's a shame when a person's life is ruined just because of another person's negligence. On that sad note, we'll wrap up today's video. What do you think of this breakthrough in nerve sparing and surgeries? Does it change how you feel about surgeries in general? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.